Well, you know, you kind of use that phrase, but it's not really about that at all. And in fact, seriously, and this is me trying to plug it to you because it's not come out yet, is there's kind of three genres in it. There's the kind of art heist, but it's not really about a stolen painting. It's actually about stolen memories, which you'll understand if you see it. And it's also it's an amnesia film, although somebody in the film says amnesia is bollocks. And it's not really about amnesia. It's actually about forgetting as a kind of behavioural choice, about something darker, about repression and denial. And it's got elements of femme fatale in it. Rosario Dawson's in it. She's very beautiful, and she uses her allure to change the behaviour of men and pit them against each other, but it's not really a femme fatale movie either. So you kind of take genres and try and use them to fool the studio, but also to entertain people, to mess with them. Because you are so sophisticated. You are. You don't think you are?
Specifically.
Because you see so many movies, especially in this country, and I've been lucky to work here and India and France, where people love movies in a way that, like, the Brits don't, but you love movies and you kind of know them in a way. Your knowledge of them is extraordinary, you know. If you'd read as many books as you've seen films, people would really respect you. They probably don't, but I do.
To kind of go back to your question before, because I wasn't really, I get where you're going with that. I guess I wasn't really listening, sort of. I was, but I wasn't hearing the same thing that Danny heard. Now I got what he meant by that. Yeah, at the very beginning, it was so easy, and I had to, like, kind of learn how to sort of, like, grit my teeth a little bit and be like, but it's not going to be that, you know? Be like, found footage superheroes, and everybody's like, oh, yeah. So that, yeah, you kind of have to play that game a little bit, and I think it is a little hard because on one hand you have the little artistic crazy person inside of you who's just like angry about things like that, but you have to finesse it into its marketing at the end of the day. And you know, when the marketing comes out, I mean, I really loved the trailer that they cut. You know, I thought that was really good, and you know, they know how to pull them in the right way. But what's great is if you can get them into the theater and then they're surprised that it is that on some level, and then it's so much more, you know, because that's an experience you can only get in the theater.
And now before we open things up to the audience for some questions, the last thing I want to ask the both of you is simply, we're talking about first films, and yet I find it interesting to think about the fact that you both obviously would live a life before you had made your first film, and Danny, you especially, you were in your kind of mid-30s by the time you had made Shallow Grave and had a very sort of successful career as both a theater director and a director of BBC television dramas, and even a producer some for Alan Clark, I think. And so I'm wondering, like, when you then sort of, you know, take that step to making your first feature film, like, how do you draw from that, the experiences that you had already? Did it really feel like something totally new and different? Like, what was it like at the time?
I was dead proud of the work I'd done in the theatre and television, but there is something different about making something for you guys to come into a dark place and just watch with a bunch of strangers in the dark. It's an amazing kind of privilege, opportunity, you know, to do something. And, you know, if any of you are trying to do it, if you get a chance to do it, be bold, because there has to be a reason why people are going to come to a dark space and watch your movie. So be bold, and bold can be huge kind of set pieces, or it can be like, if you've seen it, this boy with the spider, you know, that, but be bold, you know, just be bold in what you do, I think.
It is kind of crazy though when Danny Boyle, who's one of my biggest heroes of all time, partially why I'm doing this, saying nice things about my movie, so I'm trying to just be like... It's beyond surreal, I can't describe it. But that said, I had no idea that you were a producer for Alan Clark.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, and I didn't know that.
He's an amazing filmmaker that we had in Britain. He's dead now, sadly. He died.
He's like, I think, one of the best filmmakers,
yes,
like modern filmmakers ever.
Yeah, and interestingly, he like the film that we made together was a film called Elephant, which was later used by Gus Van Sant. In fact, Gus Van Sant rang us up. Alan had died by then, sadly, and he rang me up and said, could I use the title for his film? And we made this film about relentless sectarian murders in Northern Ireland. and he called it Elephant. The thing nobody was talking about was these murders. But he developed this style, this Steadicam style, which Gus Van Sant used as well, which was just, and it's sort of like a point of view. It's a sort of relentless observation of something, and yet with constant progression and movement in it. And he was a very, very original filmmaker.
His Elephant is still one of the most haunting movies I've ever seen, because the structure to it is just it's one killing after another, and you don't realize what's happening at like 5 minutes into it. And Scum, how they did the 2 versions of it, because that was the first like censorship issue in the BBC, right?
Yeah, he made a version for television which was utterly banned, completely banned. A lot of outrage about it, and therefore they made it as they had to remake the whole thing as a feature film in order for it to be released.
With the same actors.
Yeah, it was all the same.
He did the same movie twice, and they're both good.
Yeah.
And so we've got a little time now to take some questions from the audience, and so I'll repeat the questions for recording purposes so everyone can hear. So
anyone know where Elephant might be available? The Alan Clark Elephant.
Oh,
the question
the
has to
Alan
do
Clark
with
collection.
I saw it on PBS, and I looked all over and I can't find it.
No, yeah, it was commercially released relatively recently.
Yeah,
so I think it's fine.
there's a collection, like I don't know if it's a Blu-ray collection, but I have a DVD collection of it.
And yeah, we have a question right there.
I was very fascinated by, this is for Danny, I was very fascinated by 28 Days Later, not only by the story, but also by the fact that you shot it on video as opposed to film. And it was also my inspiration to buy my own camera as well. And my question is there plans to shoot a third 28 Days film?
The question has to do with the 28 Days Later and then 28 months later, and if there's going to in fact be a third film.
Yeah, well, there's an idea for a third part of it. Whether it happens or not is very, very complicated, but we're actually working more, I hope, more productively at the moment on a sequel to Trainspotting. Yeah. Josh mentioned the BBC. We had this comedy series in Britain called The Likely Lads, which is about 2 guys, and then the writers who wrote it, 10 years later, it was very popular, 10 years later they wrote an update. This is way before sequels were ever imagined or anything. Well, and it was called Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads, and it looked at these guys who would start, in the first series they were 20, and in the later series they were 30, and what had happened, the difference to them, and it was mesmerising. And we always had this idea with Trainspotting, is that we take these guys who were in their early 20s when you can do almost anything to yourself in pursuit of pleasure and get away with it, in most of the time. And what happens to them when they're in their 40s, when, as some of you will know, is you can't quite do that with as much fun. And we thought it'd be wonderful to see, it'd be a wonderful way to do a sequel to something that was very popular, but not just a simple cash-in kind of sequel, really, but something that had a heart, really.
And it will be with some of the same cast?
It would have to be with all the same actors playing all the same parts, because that would be the nature of it, really. So yeah, so we're working on that more than the 28 Days Later idea, yeah.
And we have a question right down here in front.
Yeah, since you mentioned Alan Clark, actually The Firm and Made in Britain are 2 of my favorites.
Love Made in Britain. It's so good.
He has this amazing sense of being in this dirty, gritty world with the characters and just being absolutely realistic. So I was wondering, how did he get that sense of reality, and what did you learn from working with him? And how would you say maybe you differ from him as a filmmaker, and what did you pick up from him?
And the question is for Danny. It's following up on Alan Clark, and as to whether maybe do you have any sense of what it is that you took from him, or how do you see yourself as a filmmaker in relation to Alan Clark? So
I worked at a theatre called the Royal Court Theatre, and I wanted to get into television. And I got this job at the BBC in Northern Ireland, and it was a very difficult time in Northern Ireland because it was very dangerous. But like a lot of these things, if you go and live there, it's not dangerous at all. You don't have to be stupid. They're wonderful people. People are people everywhere, And so I actually got the job because nobody else applied for it because they were so frightened of going there. So I found out I was the only candidate. Seriously, that's God's honest truth. And anyway, before I went, I thought I need to go and watch somebody work with a camera. And the guy I loved was this guy, Alan Clark, who stuff I'd seen, because if you know his work, it's mesmerising when you watch it. His innovation, and yet the mixture of the subject matter, and yet the stylistic innovation he'll use to capture it. And so he said, yeah, come along. And I went along to watch this film he was making called Christine, I think, which was set on a housing estate in London. And he was beautiful. What I got from him was his sense of camaraderie with the crew. He treated everybody the same. It didn't matter whether they were the top dog, the producer, or whether it was some young guy making the tea, you know, just starting off. He treated everybody the same. I was really struck by that, really learned from that. And he had this thing of he would take a risk. His coverage would be bold. And he would say, make sure you get the coverage that you'll need it in the editing room, but once a day, always take a risk, a big risk. You know, the way you shoot something, you know, so that it feels like it's not just, it couldn't just be done by anybody, it's been done by you, you know, so and I really learned from them.
And yeah, we got one way in the back there.
I really enjoyed your film, Sunshine, and my question is, you know, if you're planning to do any other collaborations with Alex Garland, and if you read as Nicoma.
The question has to do with your film Sunshine and whether you're going to be collaborating again with the writer Alex Garland, and also if you have any thoughts on what's the name of his?
It's Coma. It's a book. Yeah, I know the book. It's a terrific book. Although I think his best book is actually The Tesseract. It's a really amazing book, which has been made into I'd never seen the film. There was a very, very cheap film of it made almost without his permission, I believe. I'm not quite sure contractually how it works, but that is a wonderful book. We worked together on 28 Days Later, and then 28 Weeks Later, and then Sunshine. And we sort of fell out a bit on Sunshine, to be honest. I suppose we came to the end. I think he wants to direct himself, Alex. And we sort of came to the end of, I mean, we remained friends. And when we finished Sunshine, he said, I hope you have a better time with, you know, on your next film, which turned out to be Slumdog Millionaire, so it was all right. It was right. But actually, I blame sci-fi films because they are fucking impossible to make. The pressure you create as an audience, by you I mean me as well, when I go and watch a sci-fi movie, what I demand as being sci-fi is so difficult to do. In a gravity world, to do the gravity-free is just like a nightmare, you know? And it's wrong. And this is Kubrick's fault. If you watch the space station, when people move in space, they don't move in slow motion. They just move exactly the same speed as you or I. There's just no resistance, that's all. But of course, in the way that he did it, he used a kind of slowed motion to make you feel the poetry of it. And we've been stuck with that ever since. And it is a nightmare to recreate. And if you do it the other way, people go, no, that's not right. It's not like that at all. So I blame the pressures of making a space movie. But I hope we'll come back together again one day.
And we've got a question right there in the middle. You young lady with glasses?
Hi, I actually saw your production of Frankenstein, which was like, now that you've obviously started out in theater and you've done a lot of film and you kind of go back to theater occasionally, well, how do you feel that your films have kind of influenced your theater world?
And the question has to do with sort of the transition from theater work back to film work and your recent adaptation of Frankenstein you did on the stage, and how do you think those two things interrelate between your theater work and your film work?
Theatre is interesting because you get reminded, I don't know what you feel about this, but you get reminded that the real storytellers are actors. You know, directing has only been invented for a kind of 100 years, maximum really. But the storytelling that actors do, where they take writing or speech and portray emotions through it in front of you as an audience, is timeless really. And when you do the theatre, because when you make a film, you hire the actors for a few weeks and you say thank you very much, and they go away and you tell the story and you kind of, and it's the reverse in theatre. You work for like 6 weeks rehearsing and you kind of just preparing them for the journey, really, and then they push you away. And they're really amazing because they might be, right the way through rehearsal, they're devoted to you. They think you're the bee's knees, everything's hunky-dory. As soon as they get in front of an audience and you try and give them a note, they say, immediately, oh, with respect, which means fuck off, basically. I know exactly how to get a laugh, exactly at the right moment, and I'll do it that way. Thanks very much, but thanks for your help. It's quite good to be reminded of that, to be honest.
And we'll go right here in the front.
So this is for both of you.
So in your early careers, when you're first starting out, and you build your reputation, and you start to call yourself like a director. When you make your first feature, is your whole like filmmaking world turned upside down? Is the whole, like filmmaking just totally different for you somehow?
And the question is, after you've made your first film, do you find that the sort of filmmaking world is totally different for you, or
Like jaded? Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. I mean, I think so, because, you have to try a lot of things out. Like, I've been shooting stuff since I was, 12 years old. Like, I would just borrow cameras from people, and I would just shoot things and try things out, and most of the stuff you shoot isn't going to be very, good. So I think once you get to that point where you're on your first movie, however that happens, because there isn't any specific there's no one way to get there. Every filmmaker who's ever made a feature film that's been in theaters, they all got there in a very different way. And I think once they've gotten there, they've done a lot of stuff that they'll never show anybody. So it does feel different, because then there's like a coherency to something you've done for the first time, and that feels good, and then you can hopefully reapply that the next time. But again, we'll see. Could all go downhill. I'm prepared for that, by the way.
I think when people get jaded, you guys spot it like immediately. Yeah. You'll spot it. You're really cruel. You don't let us get away with anything. You'll spot the jaded, the cynical, the kind of manufactured stuff. You spot it very quickly, and you dispense with it pretty quickly as well. So.
And Danny, is that part of the reason why it's important for you to maintain that sort of first film feeling, is so that you don't feel like you're repeating yourself?
Yeah, personally, yeah. Although you are repeating yourself constantly, and I've begun to realise that actually all the films I've made are exactly the same film, which is that there's someone, it's usually a guy, who faces insurmountable odds and somehow overcomes them. It's exactly the same film every time. What are you doing? Anyway, there's a slight change in this one. There is a slight change in this one. But you'll have to work that out for yourself and go and see it.
But that's kind of like making a movie, though.
Yeah, it is a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, the process itself.
And let's see, right there?
I just want to say to Danny Boyle, I just want to thank you for an extraordinary job you did for the Olympics. My question to you is, the moment before you made your first film, you worked in theater and television. What was the ultimate preparation to go and make a feature-length film? When you know that the design, the construction of a feature film is, it's a little different in theater and television. What was for you the best preparation to get into making an actual feature film?
And so Danny, when you made that first leap, having directed in theater and directed on television, and you made your first feature film, what was it that you did to really make the preparation for that sort of next step to feature film directing?
The big thing we did, we had this film, we had £1 million to make it, and we were not going to get any more, and we had to decide how to spend it. And I remember having a meeting and deciding that we were going to spend all our money on interiors and actually shoot the exteriors very, very quickly. So we shot the exteriors in a week and then spent all the rest of the time and all of our money on the interior sets. And if you've seen Shallow Grave, it has these big rooms, which is based on a realism. There are flats in Edinburgh, where the story is based, are like the TARDIS in Doctor Who. They're very small on the outside, and you go in them and they open up and they're very big. And we spent all our money on that. And that was, that kind of bold, conceptual thinking about how you're going to shoot helps you, especially on a restricted budget. And if any of you thinking of getting into it, you'll probably be shooting on a restricted budget. And you need that boldness. And you can see that boldness in Chronicle. That boldness of thinking about, no, we'll do it like this. And the camera he'll pick that camera up with his strength and let him look at him in his bedroom. So simple, such a nothing scene in a way, and yet it's very tender, beautiful, and stylistically really surprising. It's that kind of, that's all I'd advise, is just, you have to have a boldness, because people expect that boldness of thinking or execution or ambition. When it's 40 foot high, it better be 40 foot high in your mind when you're making it,
And we've got time for just one last question. And we'll go right here, down in the front.
Backtracking to the Olympics, what was it like working with Queen, and what was it like filming Buckingham Palace?
And the question has to do with your work on the Olympics, and what was it like directing the Queen and shooting in Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, well, yeah, she was great. She was very, yeah, no, she was very good. It was a bit of a nightmare organising it, because she's pretty busy, and Daniel Craig, who was shooting the Bond, was also pretty busy. So getting the two, it was the kind of nightmare for the production managers trying to get the two of them together in the same room. And we had the option of doing it with CG, you know, splitting the room and putting them together separately, shooting them separately. But we thought, no, we want it to be an event. We want them to be there on the same day.
Is the Queen used to doing like CG shoots like that?
I don't think very much phases her at all. And she said, so anyway, so we turned up on the day, and she said, so I went in to see her. So the room we shot in is the room where she meets the prime ministers and stuff like that. So, but she had these other rooms which are much more like your room. It's full of bits of paper and tea trays and all sorts of, you know, the human lives there. And she said, I've just been at the dentist all morning, so I'm not in a very good mood. Which was like putting me in my place right away. But she said, tell me what you want, and I told her. And she remembered it, because you know sometimes when you turn around on actors, when you shoot an actor one way and you turn around on them, they forget, you know, kind of principles of. But she remembered it every time, so she was she's very smart. There's no flies on her, which is what we say in Britain.
And now, before we leave, we're going to take a sneak peek for all of y'all here. We're going to take a look at the Red Band trailer for Danny's new film, Trance.